Hello my dears, and welcome back to my corner of the internet. I'm Shannon, and today I've got another book talk video to share with you guys. This one's going to be a short one because the book was short. Basically, today I noticed that I had an Audible credit to use, and so I googled like what's a good Christmas novella that I could listen to, because I was in the mood to listen to something festive. So I found this one. It's very short. The Audible file is only about 40 minutes, and like 35 of those minutes are the story, and then the rest of it is an afterword from the author, which I honestly found just as interesting as the story. Now, the story was also narrated by the author, which is really cool too. I love when that happens. You get that sort of, sort of special personal kind of touch when it's the author reading their own words. So I really liked this. Anyway, the book we are talking about today is The Wood at Midwinter by Susanna Clarke. And I had never read anything from this author before, but I had heard a lot of people last year or the year before talking about a book of hers called Piranesi, I think. And people that I have similar tastes with really seemed to love it. So I was like, okay, when I saw her name pop up, I was like, well, let's give it a listen. So we did. Now, I loved this. What I would say though is I'd recommend trying to find it from the library, or I also heard that when I was looking it up that there's a recording, maybe on YouTube, of her reading the story out loud before Christmas last year or in 2022. So maybe you could listen to it for free. And the only reason I say that is to get it from the library or watch her YouTube recording of it is because where it is so short, I looked it up on Amazon and it's quite pricey for the length of it, but it's a lovely story. And one thing that I will say in favor of purchasing the book is that apparently it has really beautiful illustrations, which I could very clearly imagine they would be lovely for the type of story this is. So we are going to get on into it. I'll give you a brief synopsis before we move on into the spoilers, but again, both parts are going to be very short because the book was so short. So basically this is about a young girl who is 19 at the time, and her name is Midwinter. I think that's how it's pronounced, and that's coming from someone who just finished listening to the audiobook where it's said many times. Midwinter. And she has a very special relationship with the woods. And if you're anything like me, like I did too when I was young, I loved being in the woods. We lived in houses that always had woods surrounding them. I'd go up into the woods, off into the forest by myself, starting when I was very young. So that part of the story really drew me in. So at the beginning of the story, her and her sister, they're in a carriage. So like this takes place a long time ago. From the vibes I'm getting. They're in a carriage, they're going through town. Her sister's talking to her. They've got the 2 dogs and a pig in the carriage with them, and they're going to the woods because her sister wants to go in there. So she drops her sister off at the woods and she goes in. And when she's in there, she meets a mysterious force. And that's really all I can tell you without telling you the spoilers. But I will say this. First of all, the audiobook, not only is she reading it, but there's sounds. Like when they're in the carriage, you can hear the sound of the horse's hoofs. When she goes into the woods, you can hear the sounds of animals and the wind. You can hear the wind, and it's just so beautifully narrated. I loved it. And yeah, so if you don't want the spoilers, now's the time to, get on out of here. So anyway, she goes into the woods. She brings the dogs and the pig with her. The pig's name's Apple. And she loves that pig. And I like it in the afterword when Susanna is talking about the animals that she chose to be in the story. She's like, I picked a pig because more stories should have pigs in them. And that's so true. We love pigs here. Me and my husband, and my daughter when she was little, like we were all obsessed with pigs. They're so cute. So could not agree more with that. So anyway, she goes into the woods. There she meets a crow and a fox. And the dogs and the pig and the crow and the fox are kind of not into each other. And the thing about Midwinter is that she can speak to animals, and she can speak to the forest and the trees. And when she's in the woods, she confesses to it that she desperately wants a child of her own one day. And then emerging from the forest, she sees herself carrying what at first she thinks is a child, but she soon finds out is actually a bear cub. And she's like, she can see it so clearly that during wintertime is going to have this child, and this child's going to be a bear. And she's like, oh. So, like I said, the fox and the crow and the dogs and the pigs are all very... I'm not doing justice telling it to you because you need to be in the story to really get it. But it was beautiful. The way it's written, there's something very enchanting about it. And it's just very, it felt so, it's like not overtly Christmas, but it's Christmas and the vibes are Christmas, even if the story isn't technically Christmassy. So then her sister comes back in their carriage and picks them all up, and off they go home. And she's sort of telling her sister all about it. And she's like, soon I'm gonna have this baby bear. It's gonna be crazy. There's a part earlier on too where her sister's telling her, Meredith is telling her sister about how she finds it hard to sort of connect with their father. And her sister, Isolde, is like, well, it could be, it's difficult to communicate with a saint. And Meredith is like, what about our father makes you think he's saintly? And she's like, I don't mean him, I mean you. And there's a part too, it's like a quote where they're talking about the woods and how much Meredith loves the woods. And she says something like, because they're talking about church versus the woods. And Meredith is like, well, a church is much like the woods, and the woods is much like a church. They're the same thing, really. And I thought that was such an interesting analogy, an interesting way to word that. So they go home, and then it's like a few months later when, the time comes when Meredith thinks she's going to have this baby, and it doesn't happen. But then her sister says, I will never forget the last time that Meredith goes into the woods and she's never seen again. And then it says, like, if you're ever in this town, go by the church, because in there you'll see a portrait of Meredith holding her little bear. And it's like, the story's so vague and like, but it's so enchanting. And if you get a chance to read it or listen to it, I would highly, highly recommend, especially if you can take a look at those pictures. The next time I'm at my library, I'm going to see if they have it so I can reread it and look at the illustrations, because I'm sure they're beautiful. And again, like I said, the afterword, I loved almost as much as the story. I loved her talking about the inspiration for it. She talks about how she really loves the music of Kate Bush, and how the character is sort of born out of an album of hers where she realized that many of the same Kate Bush songs are about the same character, and this is kind of her take on that character. And I just, all in all, very, very interesting, and would definitely recommend, especially if you're looking for something that's Christmassy and has the vibes of Christmas, but isn't too Christmassy, and is a little bit, fantasy and whatever else you'd call it, and a very quick read. It was the perfect read for today. So there you go, you guys. I hope you found this interesting. If you did, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't already, and if you've made it this far, let's think, leave a what emoji? A pig. Leave the pig emoji. And I will see you guys again tomorrow.